Dr. Edward Ahmed Mitchell.
With you. My name is Edward Ahmed Mitchell. I'm an attorney and the Deputy Director of the Council on American-Islamic Relations. It's a pleasure to speak to you here from the United States of America. Let me start by thanking the European Muslim Forum for inviting us to be with you here today. Our Executive Director, Nihad Awad, wanted to be with you personally, but unexpectedly he could not join you. But I am here on his behalf, and I extend greetings from him and the entire American Muslim community. For those of you unfamiliar with CAIR, let me briefly note that the Council on American-Islamic Relations is our nation's largest Muslim civil rights organization. Our mission is to enhance the public's understanding of Islam, to promote justice, to counter Islamophobia, bigotry, to build bridges of understanding, and to defend civil rights and civil liberties of all Americans, especially Muslim Americans. I want to briefly today, inshallah, discuss with you what is happening in America in relation to three different issues, and the hope that you can take some lessons and benefits from what is happening and how we're dealing with it here in the United States. So there are three major issues that are impacting our country and so many countries in the world. The first, obviously, is the COVID-19 pandemic, which has been horrible around the world, but especially horrible here in America. The second is a national reckoning that we as Americans are having with the issue of racism, which has haunted our country for not just years, not just decades, but centuries. And we are dealing with this issue once again. And the third issue is our upcoming presidential election, which could have a major impact on the future of the Muslim community in America and our country at large, and I dare say people all around the world. Now, these three issues may seem to be unrelated: COVID-19, racism, the presidential election, but I can assure you they all very much are related. And let me explain why. First, the COVID-19 pandemic. This disease is not racist. The disease does not pick on people of any particular nationality or race. But because of structural inequities, structural racism that exists in America, COVID-19 has had a disproportionate impact on minorities in our country, especially African Americans, who are dying of COVID-19 at a much higher rate than we are, than the rate that we make up in the general population. Now, this is largely a result of the fact that, number one, African Americans, minorities tend to be experiencing a lower socioeconomic status in our country. And if you are poor, if you're living in cramped conditions, if you don't have access to health care, then you are more likely to be getting sick and not being able to get treatment when you are sick. And so because of that, we're facing a serious issue. The other issue to note is that here in America, our country did not completely shut down. There are still people having to go to work, to man grocery stores, to do the quote-unquote essential work. And those people often tend to be people who are people of color. And because they have to go out there on the front lines, they are also being exposed to the virus. I should also note that many of the doctors in America are people of color. They're also on the front lines against this virus. And our doctors are oftentimes hospitals understaffed, overwhelmed, underfunded, and people therefore also are at risk of getting sick. So I say that to say that racism is very much impacting how people are suffering from COVID-19 in our country. The next thing that I want to note is the national reckoning on racism. Here in America, as you all know, the issue of racism against African Americans has been a persistent evil that has haunted our country for centuries. Even though segregation ended in our country long ago, the impacts of centuries of slavery, decades of segregation, racial terrorism continue to impact our nation. We've especially seen this in the issue of police brutality. You all have seen the videos. In recent months, several police shootings of unarmed black men and women have occurred, and this has sparked upheaval in our country from people who have just had enough and are vigorously speaking out against systemic racism in our country, taking to the streets to speak out against it and demanding real change. Now, in response to that, our government has taken authoritarian steps that you would only usually see in some of the most dictatorial countries. Unarmed federal officers on the streets attacking protesters, shooting protesters with rubber bullets. And we've even seen police officers who are being criticized for police brutality, engaging in police brutality at protests against police brutality. And so this issue has been happening simultaneous with the COVID-19 pandemic. And then the last issue we're grappling with is our upcoming election. President Trump is up for re-election. Congressional seats are up for re-election. And so all this is happening at the same time. We are struggling to determine what the future of our country will look like. Are we going to tackle this pandemic in an intelligent way that saves lives, or are we going to simply ignore it as it kills more people? Are we going to address the long-standing issues of racism in our country, or are we just going to try to beat it down with batons and tear gas? Are we going to have a free and fair election? And will the results of that election be respected? These are all issues that we're grappling with, and they are all very much interconnected. Now, finally, how are these issues impacting Muslims in America? How are Muslims in America responding to these issues in positive ways? I want to note that first, Muslims have been on the front lines of responding to the COVID-19 pandemic in America. A significant percentage of medical professionals in America are Muslims. We have many Muslims who came to America to go to school. They stayed, became doctors, and they are risking their lives, including Muslims who have died of COVID-19. There's a there's a young woman in Virginia who contacted CAIR to let us know that her father, a retired doctor, decided to go back to work to help an understaffed hospital, Muslim man, Muslim immigrant, and he died of COVID-19, risking his life. He didn't have to. He wasn't getting a paycheck for it. He just risked his life. So Muslim doctors are in the front lines of fighting this pandemic. And in addition to that, we've got mosques, Muslim organizations that are on the front lines of serving people who've lost their jobs, who are in danger of not having a meal to eat. They have been on the front lines making sure to serve and feed and protect people of all backgrounds. And secondly, I want to note that Muslims are also in the fight against racism. The Muslim community is incredibly diverse. African Americans, white Americans, Asian Americans, Arab Americans. We are, number one, taking steps to make sure we have internal Muslim unity, that we are combating racism within our community, our families, our masajid, and then we're also making sure to let our community know that we stand against anti-black racism, that fighting racism is part and parcel of the Islamic faith, and we have been making that effort as organizations, as masajid, and individuals. And finally, obviously, Muslims are very much engaged in our political process now. We've got a record number of Muslims running for office to make sure that we are not on the menu, but at the table, so to speak, and to make sure that we are engaging with all political parties. And so I say all that to say that, you know, we are reflecting and in many cases imitating what European Muslims have already done successfully. We're taking lessons from you. And I hope that if there's anything we're doing that's unique, you can take lessons from us, and we staying united with our Muslim brothers and sisters all around the world to combat injustice within our countries, within our communities, and all around the world. We are with you, we support you, and we thank you for having us with you today. Jazakallahu khairan. Assalamu alaikum.